Hey guys, this is gonna be our last section, or our last day, I guess, of phase 2 of remote learning. As of right now, still not really sure what phase 3 is gonna end up holding for us. As soon as I find out, I'll let you guys know. But right now, I don't really know a whole lot of what's going on. So we're just gonna keep going. I'm guessing that phase 3 is gonna end up looking pretty similar to phase 2. So today we are gonna finish up the bird section. We're gonna go over the bird diseases. And then I'm gonna end up posting the bird disease scenarios. For right now, I'm gonna hold off on posting these SchoolNet questions. If I end up posting them, I'll let you guys know. But for right now, I think I'm just going to hold off, and we'll do that on Monday, depending on what phase 3 of learning on Monday is going to look like. So moving on to the PowerPoint. Like I said, we are doing diseases of birds. We're going to cover parasites, contagious diseases, non-contagious diseases, and see where we get through that. So birds, most commonly, if they're going to get internal parasites, you're going to see them getting roundworms, or tapeworms, which is the next one. So the difference between roundworms and tapeworms is pretty obvious. Hopefully by now you know roundworms look like a spaghetti noodle. One nice long skinny spaghetti noodle that lives in the small intestine and eats the nutrients that are supposed to be getting absorbed by the bird. They create eggs, and the eggs are excreted in the feces, where they stay in the grass on the ground until something comes up and eats them. The eggs, they turn to little larvae. They can climb up the little like grass leaves. A bug can eat them, and then a bug will have the roundworms. Then a bird's going to come by and eat that bug, and then that's how the bird is going to end up getting roundworms. Tapeworms, pretty similar scenario. Just about exactly the same scenario, except the only difference is going to be that tapeworms are segments. So they look like little rice pieces. Their life cycle is still essentially the same. Tapeworms are harder to get rid of because one of these pieces can break off and regenerate and end up looking just like the original one. So tapeworms are really difficult to get rid of. You would rather your bird had something like roundworms, where if the worm's coming out, that worm's coming out. With tapeworms, this entire worm can come out, and you're like, oh, I got it, all good. And accidentally leave behind a segment or two. Those two segments can end up regrowing and regenerating, and your bird still has tapeworms. Worms, the way you have to get rid of them is with a dewormer. With worms like the roundworm and the tapeworm that are living in the small intestine, you're going to end up seeing them. You're going to have to get rid of them with an oral dewormer. So if they're in the digestive system, then you need to get them out of the digestive system. And the way you're going to end up doing that is by giving an oral dewormer that's going to end up traveling all the way through that bird's digestive system and excreting them out. External parasites, you don't really see the really common parasites like fleas and ticks on birds. More commonly than not, you're going to end up seeing mites. And if you end up seeing them, that is. Mites are so small that it ends up normally taking a large infestation for you to see that something's wrong. Red mites, they're going to look like tiny red specks. And they're going to end up biting the bird and feeding off the blood. The bird, just like any other animal that might have mites, is going to end up like scratching themselves. With birds, they're probably like trying to pull out their feathers, so that you end up seeing something like this if it isn't treated. Birds can also get feather mites, which are pretty similar to the red mites, except they're not red. These ones are going to be this like brownish blackish color. They look pretty similar to coffee grounds. They'll end up causing the same thing though, and it'll cause the birds to like pick and almost chew at their feathers to try to pull them out. You may end up seeing them, being able to see them on the bird's feathers, since that's where they most commonly are. Red mites, they will typically only feed at night. So like if you put your bird to bed, but you still hear them like creating a lot of ruckus, and that's kind of out of character for them, and you come in and you see them starting to like pull at their feathers, you might see a little bit of like these weird red splotches that can indicate red mites. Whereas feather mites, your bird's going to be picking and messing at their feathers day and night. Feather mites aren't picky about when they go and they try to feed. With the bird trying to pick out their feathers, you may pick up a feather and you may actually be able to see these little specks. And birds can also get scaly leg mites. Oh, scaly leg mites are they're different than the feather mites and the red mites because they live on the bird's leg. A bird with scaly leg mites, the way that the mites live is they burrow under the scales on the bird's feet. Pretty gross. So the feathers, or not the feathers, but the scales, instead of laying like flat against the leg, they're going to be kind of sticking out and looking almost kind of like they're stacked because the mites have ended up burrowing under them. The way you treat the scaly leg mites is you can use like Vaseline, mineral oil. You want some kind of like thick ointment to put on the bird's legs to try to suffocate the mites. You do that for several days and hopefully it'll get rid of the leg mites. As far as the red mites and the feather mites, what you're going to end up having to do to try to get rid of them is like a dust. Typically mites indicate that the bird's like sanitation isn't that great. Not that their cage isn't clean, but like the bird in itself is kind of nasty. The bird will need a bath. More commonly though, you'll see the bird will want like a dust bath because the mites, they like kind of like this oily kind of place to live. It makes it easier for them to be able to move, easier for them to like get through. So the dust, if you give your bird a dust bath, that dust will cling to those feathers and it'll help to try to soak up those oils. You can buy bird dust or bird bath dust at pet stores, online. Most birds will naturally like to dust anyways. So like we've seen our chickens doing it outside. They're laying in the ground, they look kind of dead because they're just kind of like laying like this. But they're actually kind of like using their legs and their feathers, their wings, to kind of scoop this dust up to get it on them. And that's just kind of their way of bathing naturally. So bacterial diseases, first one is parrot fever. Parrot fever, it's a bacterial disease. So typically you can try to give antibiotics to get rid of it. It's also called psittacosis. You're gonna see the word psittacosis or something similar to that pretty often. And that just means psitta is part of the scientific name for parrots. Parrots are of the psittacine family. So Psittaacine, psittacine. The P is silent. So the psitta, it's a weird word, but it just indicates it's a disease carried by birds, more than often parrots. So parrot fever, it's spread through the bird's feces, through the spores, and a human, it is zoonotic. So a human or another bird can breathe it in and it goes to the lungs. It'll cause some difficulty breathing and it'll end up spreading to like the liver and the spleen and other parts of the body. It's not really a disease that you want because it's pretty painful considering how many different parts of your body that it affects. So if it's caused by bird poop, then the easy thing you can do is to keep your bird's cage clean. Bumblefoot. Bumblefoot is basically, it's inflammation of like the feet and the joints on the bird that's caused by a staph infection. So you'll end up seeing like this main part right here of the foot swelling up due to the staph infection. You can end up using about like an ointment. Typically it's gonna be kind of like a combination of like antibacterial, antifungal, like all these different kind of ointments combined into one. It'll be put on the bird's foot, and then it'll be wrapped so that to kind of like take the pressure off of it for the bird, and hopefully keep that ointment on the spot so that it will continue being treated. You can see this pretty commonly in chickens. It's not just like an exotic bird breed disease. Different birds all the time can get it. So viral diseases that are spread, that are contagious. The first one we got is the cytosine beak and feather disease. So again, we're seeing that cytosine, which literally like just means parrot. So the parrot beak and feather disease, it's also commonly called the French molt, because what it ends up doing is it's an immune system disease, and you don't really see it or know that your bird has it until they go to molt their first round of feathers. So their feathers fall out so they can like regenerate, regrow, and come back prettier than ever. So your bird's feathers fall out for them to molt naturally, and it's all good. And then the new feathers don't come back the way that they're supposed to. They come back like really weakened, deformed, like they'll easily break off. It's unknown. Like no one really knows what causes the beak and feather disease. So because no one knows what causes it, there isn't a treatment for it. Most birds will typically end up recovering on their own from it. It just takes a while for the bird to be able to recover. Newcastle disease is another viral disease. It's not something at all that you want to see in your birds. Typically, you're going to find it though when you bring in new birds. Typically, they're going to be like exotic ones. When you bring in new birds and you don't quarantine them and you just dump them right in with all your other birds, and one bird has Newcastle disease and it spreads like wildfire. So imagine you own a chicken house, and a chicken house will hold like thousands of chickens. You get like a new shipment of chickens in, you don't quarantine them or anything, because you're like, oh, there's like 300 of them. Like, why am I going to quarantine 300 of them? So you just dump them right on in with the rest of them. They have Newcastle disease, and then they spread it to your thousands of chickens, and then there's no treatment. You can't do anything. The disease is so contagious that when the bird dies, and the bird will die, you have to incinerate them, because even if you bury them, the disease will live in the carcass for up to 12 months. So burning the carcass is the only like real surefire way to make sure that this disease isn't going to continue spreading. It's really good to try to prevent it. Quarantining is super, super, super important, because you're going to see it in new birds that you bring in. It could be exotic birds, it could be domestic birds like chickens. But this is why you have to quarantine your birds for at least a couple of weeks. Make sure your facilities are clean, because the disease, it's easily killed by disinfectants. But once it infects a bird, there isn't anything that you can do. So keeping the facilities clean. I also read into it, and it said that sunlight is really important for preventing the disease. The disease almost kind of acts like a fungus, where it likes these like dark, damp, cool places. So by you keeping the facilities clean and by making sure there's sunlight going in, then the disease is less likely to be able to survive in the environment. Nutritional problems of birds, diet is really, really important for making sure that these birds live a healthy life. One thing that you can see in birds if you're not feeding them properly is goiter. Goiter is like a thyroid issue, and it's caused by an iodine deficiency. Your bird isn't getting the proper feed, isn't getting the correct amount of iodine, and it causes their thyroid to swell up. It's uncomfortable for the bird. They're probably not going to die because it's a deficiency, but it's really easy to treat. All you have to do is fix their food and make sure that they're getting enough iodine. Rickets is a disease that humans can also get. Rickets is caused by low calcium. So that little, like that cuttlefish bone that's in that bird's cage, this is part of why it's so important. Your bird needs to have enough calcium in their body, because if they're not getting enough calcium, then their bones can end up deteriorating and softening, leading to them being able to like possibly break bones, their bones deforming, and honestly, there isn't really much you can do outside of going in and having surgery done on your animal to get that bone set back in place to where it was supposed to be. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that. So making sure your bird has calcium is one of the most important nutrients that you can give a bird. It's really important that they have calcium so they have good bone structure and their skeleton's healthy. Obesity is also really common, especially in like exotic birds, because you're giving the bird either too much food or too many oil seeds like sunflower seeds, or peanuts. You're giving them too much food, too many oil seeds, and often obesity ends up leading to heart disease. Heart disease is really, really common in birds because in the wild, naturally, birds are meant to fly like miles a day. So they can eat whatever they want because they're literally going miles a day. But when they become pets, their metabolism, their body is still the same. They're still wanting to eat the same amount of food. But because they're caged and they're kept in a house, they're no longer able to fly those miles and miles a day. So they end up getting obese. And more often than not, that's going to end up leading to heart disease. And the bird is going to end up dying. Symptoms in birds that you can see that like aren't necessarily maybe the healthiest. Most commonly, birds will sleep on one leg. They just kind of like perch on one leg. It's a thing. Think of like flamingos, except that actually all birds do it. So if you see a bird that's sleeping on two legs, it can mean that like maybe like they have a bum leg, maybe they have bumblefoot, where one of their legs isn't quite up to where it should be, and they don't feel comfortable sleeping on one leg, so they sleep on two, so they can kind of keep the pressure off of one of those legs. If you see a bird that's like constantly like fluffing out its feathers, that's one way that birds try to like get warm, retain some body heat because they're cold. Birds do like a very warm environment. So if your bird's constantly doing this, then they're cold. They need a heat lamp, they need the temperature increase, they need something. If their feces is running, and granted a lot of birds' poop is relatively running, if their poop is running, they may have some kind of digestive problem. It could be worms. It could be that they're not getting the correct food. It could mean a lot of different things. And if they're not flying around, like if you let them out and they're not flying around, it could mean that like the bird is sick, because birds naturally, they want to fly. They live to be outside of their cage so that they can fly around. So if a bird isn't wanting to fly, if they're wanting to like kind of stay low, stay close to the ground, something is probably definitely wrong. If you see any eye discharge, You never really want to see eye discharge in an animal, period. But in birds, an eye discharge can typically mean that they have some kind of cold. And again, you need to increase that temperature. If you hear them like wheezing or their breathing just isn't quite the way it should be, they may have some kind of respiratory problem. And if they're not eating the way that they should be, then typically, yeah, that means they're sick. Because the only time we change our eating habits is when we don't feel very good. Birds do the exact same thing. Other problems you can have with birds, overgrown claws. Again, that cuttlefish bone is really important for them to try to file that down. You can clip your bird's nails, but there's a lot of trust required between you and the bird if you're going to sit there and you're going to clip their nails. Just like other animals, like when we cut the guinea pig and the rabbit's nails in class, you need to watch out for that nail. You don't want to cut too far up and hit that blood vessel. You don't want to hit the quick of it. Feather plucking is always really bad. And it's hard, it may be difficult to diagnose exactly what's wrong if the bird's plucking feathers, because they can pluck feathers for a ton of different reasons. It could be because they're bored. It could be because you're not giving them what they need to eat. They could have mites. They may need a mate. They may need a bath. Like, you name it. And it will probably cause feather plucking. Birds living indoors, they're gonna want some kind of bath. So they are encouraged to sit there and preen and kind of clean themselves. It could be like a water bath, like a little water dish. It could be like a spray or a mist. It could be a dust bath, but they're gonna want, like, it's natural for birds to preen and to clean themselves. But they're gonna need some extra water or something to be able to continue doing that. It's like taking a shower without water. You're not just gonna go stand in the shower and scrub yourself with soap if you don't have any water, right? Birds need water or they need dust in order to bathe themselves. Kind of already just talked about that. Small birds, they're gonna want kind of like a little bird bath for them to hop in and kind of like splash around and clean themselves. Whereas larger birds, they might like a large container to be able to bathe in, but it's probably gonna be easier for you to get like a mist kind of system to like gently spray them with mist. They're not gonna wanna be like shoved under the sink and get soaking wet all of a sudden. They're not gonna like that. They just need a little bit of moisture on their feathers, not necessarily like soaked through. And they're gonna want to bath like maybe a couple times a week, 2 or 3 times a week. Selecting the right bird is always like really important. You want to select a bird that isn't sick. They look healthy. When you take the bird home, you want to provide the best environment for them, somewhere warm where they're not going to get cold, somewhere where they're not going to be stressed out. Nothing's going to be messing with them. You want to try to do, like, these are simple things that you can do for your animal that will end up making their life better long term. Quarantine is really important for your animals. You want to quarantine them for at least, like I said, minimum 2 weeks. Like 3 or 4 weeks is going to be way better. So that you can see if they have any kind of symptoms that you're kind of like, I don't know about that. Maybe we need to take you to the vet first. And sanitation is super important. There's so many diseases that are spread through feces. And I love birds. I love the chickens. But birds are gross. You want to clean their cage. Make sure they have fresh food. Make sure they have fresh water. Make sure their perches are clean. Not just like the cage floor, but like all their perches too. Because if they're on that very top perch and they poop, and it hits that first or second perch, it's not going to clean itself off. So just making sure that the entire bird's cage is clean. Birds do naturally like it 85 to 90 degrees. You got to keep in mind that most of these birds we're talking about are exotic birds. They're from Costa Rica. They're from the Amazon. Like, They're from where it's very, very warm. They weren't made to live here naturally. They're gonna want somewhere warm for them to be able to kind of live. Obviously, no one is really gonna want it 85 or 90 degrees in their house, but like put them in a warmer location. Maybe put them somewhere where you can kind of like, you can put a heater in the room. Put them near a window that's got a curtain over it so that heat can come through the curtain but not bake them. Give them a heat lamp, like something so that they're able to stay warm. You also want to provide like a couple of perches for the bird to be able to like go to these different levels, give them something to kind of do, avoid any drafts. If you think that your bird may be sick, providing something, so like similar like Pedialyte, like when people get sick or they get dehydrated, Pedialyte, even though it was originally made for babies that are sick, Pedialyte does an excellent job of like quickly rehydrating. Birds, they may also need the same thing. So sugar water, honey water, I mean, even orange juice, some kind of fluid that you can get the bird to drink that's going to be able to provide them a little bit of energy, get something in their system outside of water. So what you guys are going to do, so y'all are going to go through, answer these 4 questions on diagnose and treating these birds. Excuse me. So read the scenario. Caged bird has a swollen abdomen, weight loss, diarrhea, tremors, paralysis. The owner mentions to the vet that they recently bought another bird into the home. So even though we didn't necessarily go into symptoms, the owner is concerned that the parrot that they just brought into their home, that they probably didn't quarantine, has gotten their other bird sick. So you're going to go through the PowerPoint and you're going to look and say, okay, which of these diseases, looking at the viral diseases, the contagious diseases, which of these diseases is going to really, really affect my bird and make them sick to the point that they may very well die. You're going to tell me what the bird is sick with and how to treat it if there's treatment for it. So like I said, I'll let you guys know what phase 3 is going to be doing for us. I'm guessing it's just going to be very similar to what we're already doing right now. So y'all keep up the good work. But I'll let y'all know whatever I find out. Join me every Tuesday and Thursday at 1 o'clock for a Zoom lunch. We can just like catch up, hang out. If you've got any questions, you can ask. But even if you don't have any questions, like still feel free to stop in and say hey. Hopefully I'll get to see you guys soon because I do miss you. So take it easy. Let me know what I can do to help. See y'all.